Hello friends! I haven't seen you in a while because I've been busy with other things. But that aside, over the last month, I was testing something new from Issy&Co. And that is the Issy&Co Active Concealer. So if you want to know my thoughts on it, then keep on watching. I think it's best to read up a little bit on the active concealer from Issy&Co before we get started, just so we have an understanding of what the formula is like and what to expect. Don't mind me, I'll just be reading on the side. So what is the Issy&Co Active Concealer? It's a hydrating oil-free concealer that visibly brightens, provides medium to full coverage, and helps soothe skin. It's designed to perform as both an under-eye brightener and a targeted concealer. This concealer has a complex blend of humectants and antioxidants, and the eye cream inspired formulation delivers hydration while helping to calm irritated skin. This range comes in 9 inclusive shades, which is amazing, and really quickly I want to commend Issy&Co for that. So I think that's pretty much it. I think that's all we need to know about this concealer. Let's dive into my review. This is my skin naturally. We're gonna start with application so you could really see the product in action. Personally, I didn't really experience any problem with the application of the concealer all over my skin because it's a very creamy formula, so I actually found that it's so easy to manipulate, move around in your skin, and you can really take your time blending it because there is no dry down as well. Regardless of what tool you use, whether a sponge or a brush, it is gonna work really well. It is that typical thing where if you want something more natural, use a sponge. If you want something more full coverage, use a brush. For me personally, I do like to use both depending on where I apply the concealer. So I'm gonna show you how I use this. So I'm using shade FN2 in the concealer. I do also have shade FN1, but if you're my skin tone, beware. For some reason, this looks really ashy on my skin, so I will not be using this. Instead, we'll be using shade FN2 just for all over the skin. So this is usually the amount of concealer I start out with, and I just kind of build from there. This is just one like that from the concealer. Anyway, sponge, I'm gonna use this to blend under the eyes. You might notice that FN2 is a bit light in comparison to the rest of my body, but it does match my face, and this will even out later. So if my face is looking a bit light at this point, do not worry. So usually when I blend with the sponge, it's just on areas where I want just a sheer or a light amount of the concealer. And then for areas where I have more blemishes, I do go in with my blending brushes. I use one of these two, the bigger one for when I want a quicker blend, and the smaller one for areas where I really want to concentrate the coverage. Now what's really nice about this concealer is I feel like regardless of where I put it on my face, it works. It doesn't make my under eyes look dry. It works really great on my blemishes, and it doesn't really emphasize any texture or weird thing that might be going on my face. It just kind of even things out in a really flattering way. So this is what one layer of the concealer looks like on my skin. As you can see, one layer is pretty much enough for day to day, especially if you don't really have any blemishes. So I'm going back in with shade FN2 just for these more stubborn blemishes. Since we're spot concealing now, I'm gonna go in with a tinier brush. So this is actually a concealer that claims to be more full coverage, like medium to full coverage. For me personally, I don't see this being full coverage. I see it more as medium full-ish because in real life, I don't know if it translates on camera, but in real life, when I look at myself in the mirror, I can still see some of my blemishes peeking through. And I feel like if you're somebody who has a lot to cover, then this isn't gonna be full coverage. But then again, everybody's understanding of full coverage is very different. And it also depends on, of course, your skin type, your skin problem. So this is what 2 layers of the concealer looks like. This is usually what I do for day to day. I'm happy with the way that this looks. So before I powder, I move on with the other steps of my makeup routine. I think now is a good time to talk about the finish of the product. On Issy&Co's Instagram, they say that this has more of a natural finish. But again, I feel like natural, full coverage, those kind of things are very different per person. For me, I wouldn't call this natural. To me, natural is like you can barely tell there's makeup. And with this, when I look at myself in the mirror, like I can tell I'm wearing makeup, but it doesn't look heavy. Although I feel like if you do just put a very light amount of the concealer, then maybe you can go for a more natural look. But since I did put 2 layers, it doesn't look that natural. But now I'm gonna go ahead and powder the skin just so you can see what it looks like with powder. Although, before I powder, I just wanna say, if you're dry skinned and you like the way that it looks naturally, which I personally do really like the way that this looks without powdering, I feel like you can get away with not powdering the product. But if you're more on the oilier side like me, I suggest powdering it to really make the makeup last longer. I don't really like to over powder with this because I feel like just a light amount of powder to just reinforce the product works pretty great. So this is what the concealer looks like powdered. I just powdered on my under eyes, my T-zone, and on my chin because those are typically the areas where I do need powder. So this is what the concealer looks like with a full face on. If you do see a dry patch on my cheeks, that's not the concealer, that is the cream blush that I use. It's a newer one, so I wouldn't really blame the concealer for that. Also, I did set my skin with a little bit of the Luxe Organics Beauty Mist in the end, just so that it's not super powdery. But yeah, this is what the concealer looks like with a full face on. I think now is a good time to talk about the longevity and overall feel of the product, so let's talk about it. On average, I wear this concealer for around 7 to 8 hours at most, and then the longest I've probably worn it was around like 10-11 hours. And I would personally consider this concealer the kind that I can trust, I can wear and forget. It's the kind of concealer that gets better with wear because although at first it might look super powdery if you're somebody who does need to powder, as time goes, once your oils start coming through, it does look like a very flattering kind of glow to the skin. Like, it doesn't look icky or disgusting. It's just like, it looks like it was done on purpose, you know, healthy skin. That's the kind of vibe that this concealer gives, even if you've gotten oily hours later. Although I do have some problem areas with this concealer, mainly my chin area and the area above my lip and on my nose. I've actually found that with this concealer, as time goes by, it will either rub off really easily or it just looks a bit crusty looking. But in comparison to the rest of my skin, it's not that big of a deal for me. So this is my face after cleaning and running around the house, wearing the active concealer and the active skin tint on top. You can see the obvious sweat and shininess on my face, but you can still see the coverage. I especially love the way this concealer wears under my eyes because I feel like throughout the day, it gets more and more flawless, especially when I get more oily. Like, it looks more airbrushed as time goes by. At the end of the day though, it still is really important to remember that this is still makeup. It will wear on the skin, it will transfer. This is totally not transfer proof, but in comparison to the skin tint and other concealers that I've used, this doesn't transfer as much. I think this goes along with longevity, but as for the way the concealer feels on the skin throughout the day and upon first application, it doesn't really feel like much. And I feel like in comparison to a lot of other products that I use, this one is a lot more weightless. Like, this one doesn't feel like much on the skin. It's very comfortable to wear, and considering now we wear a mask, I don't find that this adds an extra layer of disgustingness on the skin. Like, it's just very comfortable. It doesn't feel like much. So before we conclude, here's a quick summary of everything I just said. Let me know if I missed anything. Feel free to ask down below, but pause if you need to read. For reference, here is the concealer next to my skin tint shade. I am shade Beach in the skin tint, but it is actually like a pinch lighter than my skin. So if you're looking at me as a shade reference, I do suggest going a shade or two darker if you want to perfectly match your skin. So overall, I really do like the active concealer from Issy&Co, and I definitely think it's one worth checking out. Me thinks the formulation is really good, but with that being said, I do think there's something missing. I don't know what's missing, but there's something about it that I can't fully say, wow, this concealer is amazing. Maybe I just don't want to admit that I love it. I don't know, but it's definitely a good concealer. If you're thinking of getting this for anybody for Christmas or maybe their birthday, I definitely think it's one that's good for a blind buy because I feel like the formulation is very universally flattering for a lot of skin tones, skin types. Anyway, that is gonna be it. If I missed anything or you want to ask me about something in particular, feel free to ask it down below. I am happy to help you out. That is gonna be it for this video, and let me know if you're gonna check this out. I will see you in my next one. Bye, friends!